Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast, where we aim to inspire and motivate people to never give up on themselves or their dreams. We will chat with highly successful people from all walks of life and discuss what motivates and drives them to successfully attack life head on and never give up. Welcome to episode number 47 of the No Quit Living podcast. I am your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is significance. Our quote of the day comes to us from John C. Maxwell. Success is when I add value to myself. Significance is when I add value to others. I'm so excited for today's episode. I was first introduced to this gentleman by a good friend of mine many months ago, and we played phone and email tag for the better part of 3 to 4 months before we were able to finally connect. When we finally spoke, I knew I had to have him on our show. With that said, it is my pleasure to introduce best-selling author, Todd Gothberg. Todd, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
The pleasure is all ours. So the first question we ask is, are you ready to make it happen today?
I was born ready, and I'm ready today, and I'm looking forward to this. Let's go.
Okay. So, Todd, as you know, the number one objective of our podcast is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never give up. And I was curious if you have either a personal story about perseverance or maybe a challenging time that tested you and you kept on going and never quit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to go way back to my high school days, and hopefully this story inspires. I'm a firm believer that people are either motivated or they're not, and we can inspire folks through our stories and through our example. But I had a really rough, I would say, freshman, sophomore, junior year in high school, late 70s, early 80s. I was quite undersized. I was 4'11" as a freshman in high school, so I was literally the second shortest person in my high school freshman class. There was one gal who was actually a little bit shorter, and as you can imagine, when you're small like that as a guy, a freshman in high school, there is a tendency, or at least there was back then, to be picked on, and I was picked on mercilessly. I was, bullied. I was abused. I was punched. I was towel whipped. I was stuffed into lockers. I lived in fear for the first 3 years or so of my high school life until I started growing. And I would come home with bruises on my arm, and my mom was always there for me, but she wanted obviously to take my concerns to the principal. I knew if I did, things would only get worse. So what I had to do eventually over time was stand up for myself, regardless of what I knew the outcome might be. And I ended up gaining courage and gaining strength and gaining a base of friends over the years. And of course, my senior year, I finally started to grow. And one of the things I vowed was never to be subject to that kind of abuse again in my life. And I think that's what drove me to accomplish the things that I've accomplished in my life. And to that point, I think life is about living a life of significance as opposed to success. And I've not met anyone in my journeys who has achieved anything of significance without having overcome something of significance, some significant obstacle, or getting through something in their past, in their history. And what I find is those trials, they either refine you or they define you. And I didn't let it define me. I never let what happened to me determine my future. I let it refine me, make me a better version of myself. And it's actually allowed me to take on the things in my life, my adult life, that have come my way and overcome them because of my past, because of my struggles, because of the things that I had to address early on. So, not quitting, to me, I never even thought about that as an option. But there were some dark days, there were some down days, but I certainly was surrounded by a wonderful family and some really great friends, and certainly my faith took me through all of that. So I would say definitely my past and my experiences in high school are a lot of the reason that I am who I am today and that I do what I do.
I couldn't agree more with what you said, is most people that have accomplished significant things in lives have all overcome significant obstacles. And I think, as you mentioned, it either makes or breaks you. And one of the things we talk quite often here at No Quit Living is a lot of time in life, things challenge you and you either bend or you break. And clearly, in this regard. You bent, and obviously it's led to some of the success you've had in your life. So speaking of some of your successes, I just finished reading, as you so kindly sent me, a copy of your book, No Reservations. And I have to tell you that on the cover, Jon Gordon, who's been on our show, I'm a big fan of his, he wrote a comment up top. He says, "This is a must-read for anyone in the service industry." And I got to tell you, I've already recommended this book to so many people. And anybody that's in the service industry, I would definitely recommend this book to them. If you don't mind me asking, how did it come about you writing this book?
Yeah, well, first of all, I appreciate the comments. It means a lot to me that you took the time to read it. I always consider it a gift that people would take the time and to read it. And really, I've got to give Jon Gordon the credit because he's inspired me. Even though he's younger, I remember meeting him at his book tour for the Energy Bus years ago, having read the book, having met him, and truly that book changed the course of my life in terms of my approach to things. And I'd always been a writer. In high school, I loved to write. I was in journalism classes. I wrote for my college newspaper. I loved writing. And I had a blog for years. And here's the thing about the book, how it came about. Once I read The Energy Bus and started to do talks on The Energy Bus and connected with Jon and had the opportunity to speak on his behalf and his company's behalf. And then I started kind of going out on my own and speaking. I did a lot of traveling. So I would fly on planes, I would eat in restaurants, I would stay in hotels. I was always on the receiving end of customer service. And I realized that very, very few people did it really, really well. And those that did it well made it incredibly memorable. So I would start to experience these awesome examples of customer service in these people. And I realized that it was the people, it wasn't the place, it was the people that set apart and differentiated the best from the rest. And then I realized that there were a number of things that these people did with consistency as they served. And it wasn't so much about what they did, but it was about who they were being when they were doing what they were doing. And I met with employees, I met with CEOs, I've met with some really famous CEOs to ask them about their hiring practices, folks like Jack Welch, Tony Hsieh from Zappos, Fred Smith from Federal Express. And the one common thing that these folks shared with me was that they didn't so much hire people, they selected people. And they selected people that had in their heart the values of the company because they couldn't teach values. And so I would speak on these stories and I would talk about customer loyalty. And one time I got done speaking and someone came up to me and said, you know, you've got these great 10 philosophies or concepts that you have created over the years based upon your experiences connecting with people and seeing great service and seeing not so great service. You need to write a book. So I started to think about a story and along the way, of course, the stories began to build and I made a move from Chicago out to Western North Carolina and Asheville. And I decided to use my own personal experience of the move from Chicago out to Asheville as the basis for the story. And as Asheville is a tourist area, I decided to use a hotel that was going under as the setting for the opportunity to tell a story about a turnaround, about a guy that leaves Chicago, the big city, and comes to a town of Asheville in the mountains in North Carolina, and what he does and who he meets along the way. The folks that come his way actually were based upon people that I've met in my walk of life and my journey, each one of them exemplifying one of the 10 principles in my book. And so the story kind of took a life of its own. Somebody once told me, you can't write the story until you've lived the story. You can't write the book until you've lived the book. And so there came a point in time about 5-6 years ago that I had figured I'd lived enough for the book to write it. And so I sat down, I took a 1 week straight off from work over the Christmas holiday, and I wrote this story. I literally wrote it in a week. And I used the same 10 concepts and principles that I had learned, that I had picked up from those that I had met along the way. Each one of them, in fact, was a gift from somebody that I had met. And I crafted this book. This book came into being, and I I remember talking to Jon Gordon about it and saying, John, you inspired me with the energy bus, and now it's time for me to write my own book. Would you give me the gift or the benefit of sending it to you after I get done and reading it and let me know what you think? So sure enough, as busy as John is, he did that for me. In the process, I found a publisher, an editor, and of course, the final gift that John gave me was the opportunity to give a recommendation and write the cover recommendation for my book, and I'll be forever grateful for that. And it's just something that it was always a dream. It was always a vision of mine to write a book. And I listen to your podcast. You talk a lot about people who have dreams and who have visions. Here was my vision, and it was so powerful. And some of the folks on your podcast have talked about visions needing to be very specific. I had a vision when I started writing this book that one day I would go online to Amazon and I would type my name in under books, and my book would come up. And sure enough, I was traveling November, I think it was mid-November of 2013, and I was in O'Hare Airport, and I remember that was the day that the book was to have hit Amazon. And I remember putting the name Gothberg in books into Amazon and seeing my book come up. And to me, that was full circle on that vision. My vision became a reality. The book hit Amazon, and the rest was just really cool. So what drove me, the mission to get that book published, every single day over a period of about a year, I was committed to doing something that would get me one step closer to that vision of getting that book published. So whether it was re-editing the book, which I did probably about 93 times, or the process of finding the cover art, a picture, or the process of getting folks in my walk of life to provide a recommendation that I could print in the front of the book, to formatting it. Every single day I did something that got me one step closer to that vision becoming a reality. And I think that's just a great process, or a great example for anyone that wants to accomplish anything. I also run a lot of marathons. I've done 5 Ironman races, and it's the same. You have this period of time in advance of the event itself that you prepare, and your mission every single day is to do something physically and mentally that gets you one step closer to that starting line. Once you get to that starting line, your vision, of course, is the finish line. And, the Bible says without vision, people perish. So I kept the vision alive for the book. No Reservations came out. And it was something that I'm incredibly proud of, because there were folks that actually had told me that I'd never write a book. I'd never get it published. I'd never find a publisher. And I use that, much like my history in high school, I use that to drive me. And to, one of my life mantras is always to prove others wrong, the doubters wrong, and just to actually do and see something come to fruition that other people don't think is possible.
It's interesting that you say that. It reminds me of a quote: "The best revenge is massive success."
Absolutely. And so a lot of people, when faced with something like that, when they want to get revenge, all they can think about is negative thoughts. They think about doing something detrimental. They think about getting back at somebody. But to your point, focus on the positive. Focus on the opportunity in front of you to prove yourself capable, to prove others wrong, to prove that they made a mistake in doubting you. Let that drive you. And if all of your effort and energy goes towards the accomplishment of the goal or the task, there's no stopping you.
No, and I couldn't agree more at that. I want to just touch on briefly something you shared. Your book, No Reservations, which obviously touches on customer service. Customer service for us is something that we talk about all the time, directly and indirectly. And the one thing that I think people miss over and over again is the very simple fact that good customer service versus mediocre customer service versus great customer service is not that extreme. It doesn't take a lot of effort to greet somebody in a hotel. It doesn't take a lot of effort to greet somebody nicely on the phone and to say something with a smile and to do it. And I really appreciate you sharing that. But the one thing I do want to touch on with your story, is you talked about something which is near and dear to No Quit Living. You talked about a goal of a book. You talked about something you wanted to do. But
Right.
what you then did is you took action. And the one thing that we always talk about on our show is the importance of taking action. And Jeff Woods, who was was a guest a few episodes ago, he talked about you can have the best content ever, but if you don't take action, it's meaningless. And I just want to commend you because there are so many people out there that want to write a book, or they want to run a marathon, or they want to run a Ironman, and unfortunately they get caught with the very common disease of woulda, coulda, shoulda. And I think the big thing for people is that they look at the end result, and it's paralysis by analysis. Running a marathon is difficult. Writing a book is not easy. But if you break it down into small little steps, it'll be easier. And then if you take action, it'll be attainable.
Well, exactly. And I'll add this to it. A lot of people like the idea of writing a book. A lot of people like the idea of completing a marathon. But there's a difference, to your point, between liking the idea of something and realizing what the cost will be. There's a cost to everything. There's a cost to writing the book. What are you willing to give up? There's a cost to running a marathon. There's a cost to doing an Ironman, which is just a significant chunk of your life for 6 months. A lot of people love the idea of that. And when they asked me about that, I said, well, you really have to want to. And I don't mean just want to like the idea of doing it. You actually have to be willing and committed to doing what it takes and the sacrifice along the way, because there will be a cost. If you're not willing to pay the cost, it's fine. Just don't do it. But if you truly want to do it and you want to accomplish something, realize there is a cost to everything worth accomplishing. And again, you've probably heard this from others on your podcast before, but in the end, it's not so much about the event itself, the day of the Ironman, the day of the Boston Marathon, the day of my book coming out. Those were great, significant life highlights. But it was the journey along the way. It was the 1 year of hard work and the 1 year of detail and the 1 year of intentional living. And that's a word I'll go back to. But you talked about people who are committed to something. It's because they live every single day with intention. They don't let the day run them. They run their day. They plan their day. They set the time aside. Jon Gordon talks every December about coming off of the road and spending time writing. He is intentional about writing, which is why he's written 9-10 books. And the same thing holds true to the process of an Ironman or a marathon or anything that you want to accomplish in life. You have to be intentional and dedicated and disciplined to set that time aside and do what others are not willing to do. And that's really, at the end of the day, that's what separates the folks that do and the folks that talk about it, or the folks that wish. And people that will come to me will come to me for advice. And I said, the biggest thing you need to know is it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be glorious. When you're training for a marathon and you're getting up at 4 a.m. to do a long run, and it's dark and it's cold of winter and nobody else is out of bed, and you're getting out there to go do it, you don't have people cheering you on. It's not race day. The toughest part of training for the marathon is in the training when no one's there cheering you on and you're tired and it's cold and you'd rather stay in bed, but you get up and you do it anyways because on race day all of that work's going to pay off. But the discipline in that process and embracing the idea and the concept of achieving something worthwhile, really, there's a lot more to it than just the idea of, oh, wouldn't it be great to do this? Because, yeah, the idea is great, but so few that I've come across and I've met in my life are actually willing to pay the price and embrace the cost.
You talked about, I think you said the word commitment 3 or 4 times during that last segment, and it reminds me of a very famous quote by Pat Riley, the former Lakers head coach, and I believe he's the general manager of the Miami Heat right now. But he had a quote, and he said, "There are only 2 options regarding commitment. Either you're in or you're out. There is no such thing as life in between." I think that just epitomizes what you talked about, and I just want to touch on, it doesn't mean that you have to do something so extreme as running a marathon or an Ironman. It could be something so simple as improving your relationship with your spouse or improving sales in your business. I think it has so much overlap in so many areas of life. So because we've talked about 1 or 2 quotes, I wanted to ask you, Todd, do you have a favorite quote?
I do, and it's from Romans 8:28. And when I sign my books at book signings or for others, I write Romans 8:28 at the bottom. I have a very strong faith, and it's guided me. And Romans 8:28 says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who've been called according to His purpose." And why I love that quote is because to me it suggests that no matter what we're up against in life, things will eventually turn out for the good. We're not promised that everything that happens to us in life is good. We are promised that things that happen to us will eventually turn out for the good. And if you believe that, the things that come your way, to your point, it doesn't have to be an Ironman. It doesn't have to be a marathon. It can be improving the relationship with your spouse. One of the things you have to realize is along the way on that journey, and you're putting in the work, and you just don't think things are going well, and things are coming your way, and obstacles are happening, and you've mentioned this in other podcasts before. Most people quit right at that moment, right before success or significance is about to happen. I think this quote for me suggests that you don't quit, that you keep persevering and you push through, and you realize that there's going to be tough times, but on the other side of those tough times is good, and things will all work out. And people who truly believe that, people who have a faith, understand and know that, so they don't spend a lot of time getting down. They keep focusing on the light ahead and hope.
No, I appreciate you sharing that, and hopefully our listeners will take it into mind, because it is typically right before something bad happens where your breakthrough comes. So here's a different spin on things. If you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
I'd say Bono. For a number of reasons. I admire the guy. Here's a singer-songwriter. He's an activist. He's a venture capitalist. He's a businessman. He's a philanthropist. He's all these things, and he's really good at all of them. And yet he uses his celebrity to fight for just causes. And he's somebody that could obviously let his success go to his head. He's somebody that could live the life that his hard work has afforded him. He's somebody that can be focused on success, and he's focused on significance. And I love his nonprofit, One, his dedication and commitment to end hunger and poverty and disease. To me, he's a fascinating human being, and he's connected with folks in all walks of life, and everyone that's kind of connected with him has come away kind of blown away with the human being, the man he is on the inside. And his music is just the conduit. I think it's just the way that he has that gets his stage. But he seems to me a fascinating person. I'd love just to kind of understand his approach to things and to life. And I love the fact that he's making a difference in the world. Because at the end of the day, I think it's about our legacy. His legacy will not be so much about the music. It'll be about the lives that he's touched, the people he's influenced, and the impact that he has made on this world. It's as simple as that.
No, I think he has done a ton for different people, and I think what he did is he took the music world and the success that he had, and he turned that success into significance in different areas. So I wanted to ask you, before we let you go, if you have any parting words for our listeners.
Well, my life word is to encourage people. Jon Gordon has co-authored a book called One Word, and every year I do one word, and my one word this year is uncompromised. I love that process of coming up with one word to guide your year. In addition, they have a book called Life Word, and my one life word is to encourage people. And so part of my purpose every day is to encourage other people, to inspire folks. And so my parting words to folks is simply figure out what your purpose is. Live your purpose. Once you live your purpose, you'll live with passion. And kind of the final quote that I have that kind of has guided my life that I heard again this past week, someone say, and I said, you know what, that makes all the sense in the world to me, because it's how I like to live my life, is do the next right thing. Sometimes we're faced with uncertainty. Sometimes we're faced with struggles, obstacles. But if we focus and take that small step and do the next right thing, and then that next right thing, I think ultimately things turn out right.
I could not agree more. We can't control the past. We can't alter the past, but what we can do is we can do the next right thing. So before we let you go, I just wanted to ask you, Todd, what's the best way for our listeners to connect or either follow you?
Well, I'm on Twitter, so I have a Twitter account, Gothberg. I am on Instagram under Gothberg as well. I have a Facebook public page for my author and speaking, and it's Todd Gothberg under Facebook. And I every week, at least once or twice a week, if you check that out, I will post an inspirational, positive quote against a pretty awesome backdrop. I have a couple friends who take some amazing nature pictures, and I'll come up with a quote. Most of the time, these quotes come to me when I'm running or swimming or biking. And so I that's probably the best way. I just love to put things out there to inspire people, to give people hope, and let people know that we're pretty blessed in this life. And so I appreciate this opportunity to be with you today.
Todd, it was awesome. I really, really appreciate not only your time, but also you sharing some of that stuff with us. And we'll put some stuff about your book in the show notes. But again, I can't thank you enough for your time.
Super. All right, Christopher, I appreciate your time today, and blessings to you, my friend.
Thank you, sir. To sum up today's episode in our theme of the day, significance, Todd really delivered. From his initial story about his rough childhood, Todd discussed how he used this to motivate him to be a better person. Instead of getting even, Todd chose to become better. Todd spoke about how throughout his life, he felt that everyone that had accomplished great things have all overcome significant obstacles. He also spoke about the importance of taking action and doing as opposed to just talking. In his parting words, Todd said something that I thought was very simple yet profound. He encouraged us to do the next right thing. Today's call to action is very simple. We can't go back to yesterday, nor can we redo this morning. But what we can do is make sure that we do the next right thing. So don't look in the past and don't get too distracted with the future, but decide right now that when you have your next opportunity to do the right thing, that you embrace it and you go for your greatness. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.